Friends, welcome. It is 11:30. We're going to get started here in just a moment. Thank you for taking some time out of your Sunday afternoon to talk with us. This is a leadership occasion, an opportunity to think as a community about a particular issue that is facing us in our common life. Some of you have been through tenser times than this in this very room, and I am so thankful to have your wisdom and your forbearance and your reminder that Trinity has been through challenge in the past. We will be in challenge in the future, and we're in a time of challenge right now. And it's good to gather with folks who love this place and have shepherded and stewarded this place through times thick and thin, because we're going to get through this and we're going to get through it together. So I'm so grateful to have you with us, and I'm going to open us with a word of prayer. Will you join me in a moment of silence as we seek God's wisdom for our common life and for our future? Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present now with we who take counsel for the future of Trinity Episcopal Cathedral. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it. We pray through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. I am going to hand things over to your intrepid senior warden, Mr. Greg Harris. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you, everyone. In terms of speaking of challenges, I'm going to need my hands free, and so I'm going to try to make this work while I navigate all the things here. So hopefully that would. How's the sound there in the back? You doing okay? Louder. All right. I'll use my theater voice then and see if we can't make that work. I wanted to ground us first, in addition to prayer, into our core values. Those of us on vestry, and I'm sure many of you find these really useful guiding lights to how we are and what we do. And so at vestry, we try to operate in such a way in our conversations, in our deliberations, in our decisions, that we're reflecting these core values in that activity. And it's my prayer that this presentation, you'll see those values in this presentation this morning. And I would invite you to hold us accountable if you see us coming up short or off the mark in terms of adhering to those core values. So, that was not auspicious. That was not auspicious.
Unless you want it.
Right. That is not an omen. That's just clumsiness on my part. There's alternative ways to navigate this, and we'll be fine. So yes, we're talking about our budget update, and we're in a pickle. We are in a tight spot with this year's budget, and so we're here because we want you to know that. And we're seeking your counsel, we're seeking your suggestions, we're seeking your help. So that is the expectation that we have for this meeting today. So here's the overview of what we're going to discuss. We're going to review budget basics, so we're all on the same page about how things generally operate in terms of our financial operations here at Trinity. I'm going to give you an overview of our current status, the current shortfall and impact is what we're talking about. We'll review next steps, and then we'll open up the conversation to what these implications are and what kind of questions, what kind of suggestions, what kind of solutions we can co-create together. So how we prepare a budget. The key thing to know is that we're on a fiscal year, right? And that's sometimes confusing people. Our budget year actually will start July 1st of 2023, coming up 1st of July, and it'll go through the calendar year and end on June 30th, 2024. Now we're on a different schedule in terms of fundraising, and it was the annual giving campaign that started last October and essentially ended in January. That's the campaign that came up short of our goal. And it's that shortfall that is contributing to the dilemma that we're facing right now. That, as well as just persistent rising costs in our operations. So those are the challenges that we're trying to deal with in the near term. Our total operating budget for this year, $2.745 million, is what we use to pay for all of our bills and our salaries. We're looking at next year's budget, again, the budget that starts July 1st, could be significantly lower because of our situation. We're operating this year on a $2.745 million budget. And we have several sources of revenue. I'm going to touch on them here and go more in detail on the next slide. So major sources of revenue, of course, are contributions. And we get that in terms of pledges and plate offerings. We also have ministry funding. Our different ministries are available or have the opportunity to do their own fundraising. And they also have the opportunity to conduct sales and do events that charge admission. So that's a source of revenue. It's really important to their operation as well. And then we have fees. We have parking fees, for example, not on Sundays for us, but for other hours. And we can have various sort of event fees, wedding fees, and things like that. Our endowment is a pretty big deal to our operating budget as well. It's a significant pool of generosity that's been given to us over the decades, really. And that's invested to earn income, of course. And we're able to take, right now our current practice is we take 4.75% of what we earned, what that endowment earned the previous 3 years, and then we transfer that into the operating budget. Oh, and then the other thing, and this is temporary, of course, is that we benefited from federal subsidies during the pandemic, the Paycheck Protection Program. So here's the process. We basically know what our annual giving campaign revenue is going to be about the end of January. So staff gets busy in February and starts preparing the budget for the next fiscal year, the one that begins July 1st. And then our finance manager, Paul Flagger. Paul, are you here? Paul, take a bow. Paul has been an excellent contributor in his work conference. And then a group of people who serve on our finance committee, known as the budget committee, begin working with Paul in early March. And they start going through the details of the budget, line by line. There's something, how many, Bill? Ben, it's 350 line items in our budget. More? Okay. So it's a big complex budget that takes a lot of care and attention and processing to go through. I believe we started in March with at least a $6-figure deficit that we are trying to address. And we've got it whittled down some now because of Paul's work and the budget committee's work, but we still have a way to go. And then there's the finance committee. Again, budget's a part of finance. And they are going to the folks who will make a recommendation on to vestry, who will then make the ultimate decision about whether or not to approve a budget or not for the congregation. If you're a current member of finance and a current member of vestry, would you please stand so we can acknowledge your contributions and effort? Thank you. Thank you. So we had a handful of goals for next year's budget. We'd love very much to give our staff a cost of living adjustment because of everyone feeling the pressure of inflation, obviously. We want to hire a spiritual formation director, replacement for Matthew Lawrence. We want to maintain that endowment earnings draw at 4.75%. And we want, of course, to present a balanced budget. So we've got a couple scenarios in play. These are current as of earlier this week, right? And neither one of them are satisfactory in terms of balancing our budget and reaching our goals. The first one, assumes that we maintain that 4.75% earnings draw, and you see we come up short some $55,000. The second one sort of approaches the possibility of increasing that draw to 5%. And it has some impact on the deficit, but again, not enough.
Greg,
Hmm.
question. How's our earnings? You know, there's been a lot of stuff in the press about earnings. Can you give us some ideas of how we're doing?
Yeah, we took a hit during the turmoil of the stock market. There was no place to hide when bonds were a problem and stock equities were a problem. It's turned around, it's getting better. I've seen it, down around 12 point something, 13 point something. We're edging up towards 14 now. We have a very competent investment management firm that gives us annual, regular reports on our status, and we're feeling good about their performance. It's just conditions have been beyond our control. So to get to those scenarios, we made a few assumptions, and these are variables. These are things that are still in play, right? We will be able, we expect, to end this year's budget, the budget that ends June 30th of 2023, with a surplus, and we can roll that over into the budget that begins 2021. There's a couple of things that is contingent upon. One is cost containment, and staff is doing an excellent job of managing costs. We don't have an expense issue. We have a revenue issue. This is where our problem is. And the other key to that then is those of us who made pledges for this year's budget, that we fulfill those pledges. Many of us, are on a monthly schedule for making a payment. And so we're counting on people who still have outstanding payments to make, May and June, but we'll follow through on those commitments. We're hoping that we'll get some new pledge revenue. Some pledges kind of historically come in every month. And so we can look at what's historically pledged in May and June, make some assumptions that something like that will come. And we're hoping that with increased awareness of what our situation is, we might consider adding to our pledges. Those of us who pledge for next year, we might consider if we couldn't add a little bit more, or if we have a pledge for next year, now would be a very good time to make a contribution. I'll say more about that again. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, there's a handful of ministries who have surpluses in their operating budgets that they've accrued over time. We're going to ask some of them if they couldn't find a way to make contributions out of their particular budgets into the general operating fund. We're looking at expanding our parking collection, our parking fee collection. We turn it off on Sundays. So for example, if the Timbers have a game Sunday afternoon, and they find our parking meters are off, well, praise be to God, right? That would seem like a big gift to God, the Timbers aren't. Right? We think God has other plans for those parking lots. And then there's a particular line item within Vestry's control. It's called Pedestrian Allocation. And it's been an accumulation over the years of funds that have been dedicated that amount. Its primary intent is to pay for unplanned expenses. At the birth of it, I remember that the idea was, well, if the boiler finally falls apart, we'll have some resources to fix that. And it's been used over the years for other unanticipated expenses. It's kind of like a rainy day fund. Well, we're going to ask Vestry to consider allocating some part of that Vestry unallocated line item to this current financial crisis.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah,
Does scenario A and B have all of those assumptions?
Yeah.
built in? Okay.
they do. The only variable that's different between A and B is 4.75 versus 5% drawing from that down. So here are our expense assumptions that go into each of those scenarios. We're looking at reducing the number of even songs that are offered from once a week or once a month to contain those costs. We're looking at closing the cathedral on Mondays. And this will affect certain groups that have regular standing meetings on Mondays. So some work will have to be done on that. We're hoping that will allow us to better manage sexting costs and reduce some of our energy costs.
Greg, would that include the pantry?
No. Well, is that right? Oh, actually,
No, that's right.
that's right. Okay. Wednesday evenings might be affected. We currently have the ability to pay our instructors for Wednesday night adult spiritual formation classes an honorarium. We're looking at removing that expense. We're also looking at cost containment on Wednesday nights. And then we're looking at all the budgets of the ministries who get general fund money and looking to cut those in various degrees to help balance our budget.
What kind of percentage?
It varies from ministry to ministry. And that's an accurate statement, isn't it, Paul? Yeah, okay. Do you think you have a range, how much it could be from? Or is that just 5 to 10%, depending on the ministry? And and this won't be a surprise. I mean, it might be a surprise in how the ministries, but it will be a conversation. So next steps, the budget committee is meeting this week to take a look at where we are. Paul's generating now a 5th scenario for us to deliberate on. We have the finance committee will meet May 16th to review where we are and pass a recommendation on to vestry for consideration. And then vestry meets May 23rd to decide what to do about the information we have and the money we have to work with to plan moving forward. So you can see there's consequences, right, for our situation. I'm concerned about next year's ending fund balance being smaller than it was this year because we cut ministries, and so they're going to have a smaller pool to work with. It's quite likely they will use, a higher percentage of what they've been given because it's a smaller piece of what they have. Stakes are going to be high for next year's annual giving campaign in order to facilitate, continuation. So that'll be really important. We probably need to be serious. We were talking about it for a little bit, but probably need to be serious about actually implementing alternative sources of revenue. We are so dependent upon annual giving. And you might think a $2.745 million budget, you could find $30, $40, $50, $60,000 there. But the fact of the matter is, you can just peel that away a little bit more. There are large portions of that bottom line is actually dedicated and not at the not available for finance to actually move around. The ministry to raise their own money. Those funds go to their specific operations. Certain amounts of the endowment draw are dedicated to particular ministries. That 4.75%, certain percentage of that is dedicated to building and grounds, certain percentage is dedicated to music, to outreach, to spiritual formation. So that's their money, not the money that we can use to address other needs. So that bottom line is smaller that we can play with, and that bottom line is essentially what pays our staff salaries and compensation. So it's tricky, right? It's not an easy thing to do. So let's see if I can go back a little bit. Well, before we get to questions and answers, and I get too far there, I want to say let me just say what I'm going to say. So the current scenario does not help us fulfill our goals, does not help us fulfill paying cost of living adjustment, hiring a spiritual formation director, keeping the endowment draw at 4.75 and presenting a balanced budget. So we need something more. We want to hear your suggestions. I want to make a direct plea for you, if you have pledged, to consider increasing your pledge for next year. My wife Elaine and I did. We increased our pledge 10% in response to this. I invite you to consider doing something similar to see if that couldn't be a way to help solve our problem. And now I'm done. I'm going to go over to you for